إلى الجلسة الرابعة لليوم، دور الذكاء الصناعي في أعمال التأمين. ندعو رئيس اللجنة رئيس الجلسة السيد محمد أبو حمدة، نائب رئيس مجلس الإدارة في Joclaims، وأيضا المتحدث السبيكر مستر أندريا ماريا، ماجستير ورأس المال الاستثماري والاستشارات الاستراتيجية، مؤسس وشريك إداري في امباكت فاندري المملكة المتحدة.
معي اليوم المتحدث مستر أندريا. المحاضرة راح تكون اليوم بالإنجليش كون مستر أندريا he's from UK. So if you have any question عندكم أي سؤال بخصوص الترجمة، أي حدا يرفع إيده مباشرة راح تكون الترجمة موجودة. So نبلش نحكي شوي عن مستر أندريا. مستر أندريا ماريا Cosentino. He has a magister and he's the founder and CEO of Impact Foundry, a venture capital studio and strategic consulting boutique that accelerates startups, SMEs, and corporate enterprise to enable growth and sustainable value creation. He's a finance, digital transformation, and entrepreneurship expert at the ESCB Business School and advisor to several startups and accelerators, including Barclays Rise and Level 39 in London. So thank you, Mr. Andrea, to have you here. And today, as you know, we will discuss the role. Okay. So في أجهزة ترجمة موجودة بالزاوية I think. So if you أي حدا بده يترجم بإمكانه يأخذ الجهاز من المنطقة الموجودة هنا. So today, as you know, if you need to know more about Mr. Andrea, you can just scan the QR code showing on the screen, and then you can communicate with him and you can consult him for anything related to IT, artificial intelligence, and digital transformation. So today, as you know, we are discussing about the AI, and we would like first to ask Mr. Andrea. So what does AI mean? Is it a good or scary thing? So yes,
that's a very good question to start scaring everyone. I think I wanted to bring this to your attention. Hard to play right now, but essentially it's a news that came out 2 weeks ago explaining how companies like IBM, for example, or a very famous learning company in the UK called Chegg, their stock plunged and they stopped hiring people because of the effect of ChatGPT. I'm sure most of you heard about ChatGPT, which is a conversational AI tool, and the news are not really promising on one hand, but on the other hand, also there is a lot of development that can be done with it. So I think the answer to that, it is very much like everything in life. It really depends what you do with it when you're given a great power. But in order to make the most of it, I think we all need to understand, what really AI is and what the solutions are. Because you can't make the most out of a tool if you don't understand really how it works.
Yes, exactly.
So maybe, I think it would be beneficial to just give a refresher to everyone and remember what AI is. So AI, in mere terms, is trying to leverage technology to replicate the human brain, okay? So that's artificial intelligence. Now, I'm sure you heard other terms such as machine learning, deep learning. Now, these are subsectors of AI, and the idea is to leverage data, okay, which are really, really important, is the raw material by which this brain works, to extract features, to extract statistics, for example, and then infer conclusions. Now, one thing where AI makes a difference is that it's able to learn. And that's where also the difference between machine learning and deep learning comes in place. Machine learning is something like statistics, really. So let's say you have a lot of data, for example, around claims, let's say, you're able to digest a large amount and extract some conclusions, but conclusions that are quite linear. If you leverage deep learning instead, you're trying to replicate the human brain. And it's like when you want a favor from someone and he goes like, I know a guy that knows a guy. And this is essentially our brain, how our brain works. So by looking at links between all the different informations that we have, we are able to then find innovative ideas. And this is essentially where technology is trying to get to. So this is, I think, then the difference between, as you see in the chart, artificial intelligence that is narrow AI and artificial intelligence that generates general AI. And so essentially I tell you to do something to the machine, and the machine does exactly that, versus general AI, which implies a more creative way of leveraging these capabilities. I think I'm not gonna bore you more with more technical explanation, but I think something that can be interesting for everyone is a bit of numbers. So if you look at the statistics, we see that a lot of companies, and this is kind of outdated because it's end of last year really, that's the best I found, but tells you already a lot of companies across industries and across businesses and regions are leveraging AI and automation for their business, finding already tangible benefits and tangible results that they can experience.
Yes. Thank you, Andrea, and I think these are sufficient information after being in the fourth session for most fruitful information. So now my question to you, as you are expert in UK and also in Europe, what's the current state of insurance in Europe and in UK?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I know I'm coming to the MENA region, so of course the idea would be to bring you something rather than giving you what you have already. You know your region better than me probably, but what I see happening in the EU and UK, of course, as you know, like most of western parts of Europe, it's a challenging time. High inflation, the crumbles of the war between Russia and Ukraine, issues with pipeline and supply chain in the UK per se. Like we are facing definitely, challenging times. Now, for sure, all the industries are contracting quietly. Now, in Europe, I think the most impactful events have been mostly, of course, COVID, like everywhere else, but also the role of climate change, which we're going to touch in a little bit. When we look at UK specifically, there are other challenges. So, there is a Brexit challenge, which implies that all companies, especially insurance companies, need things like passporting to market their product abroad as well. And you know that London is insurance central, really, is where most of the insurance companies of the West world are based, and they were born probably. I mean, England, the story of London is around insurance, really. And then there is capital challenges, so the regulation as well. Since Solvency II has been put in place back in 2016, we have seen a high raise in terms of cost of capital, for example. And so this is where, the pace of the industry that is not running at the pace that it should, that's when it start hitting balance sheet and performance of insurance companies.
Excellent, that's understood. So now you have briefed us some about the insurance in the UK and about the AI. So if you would like to merge the AI and the insurance, so there is a terminology called InsurTech, right?
Yeah.
So what does InsurTech mean?
Well, InsurTech, as you mentioned, is the merge between insurance and technology. I think you can think of fintech, which was really the early days of financial worlds that miss technology. Even though by definition the financial world has always been one of the most technologically advanced. If you think that the first connection of hedge funds cable was built in New York and London, like back in the days where connection was a very new thing, and if we look at data has always been at the core of the insurance sectors per se. So, like actuaries, they base all the work on data and information that they have. So InsurTech is just the next level of, what we see happening in the fintech space. Now, why, as much as in fintech, we see InsurTech coming up is because, of course, there is a lot of challenges in the industry. And as we know, competition among conglomerates is one of those. Regulation, I mentioned it. And then there is new things, as we say, like customer experience as well. I mean, I remember personally, again, living in a place where services are quite evolved, and still I kind of dread the moment I have to deal with my insurance because I don't know how long it's going to take or what is going to happen next. In a world where we want everything yesterday, not even now, I think it's key to remember the customer experience is a key driver of performance and revenues. And of course, other new challenges, like for example, cyber threat. That's something that the more technological we get and the more we're trying to make more money with AI and things like that, then we have to think, okay, but this opens new doors and new entrants for potential threats, right? Think of your company like a building as it could be, and the more connections you have, the more windows you have, and the more doors you have. And so the more risks you have, right? So you need to then think of new ways to protect yourself. And finally, as I mentioned, climate change. climate change is something that, is there, is happening, and because of, as we will see later as well, like, is one of the areas where actually there can be an opportunity for insurances to diversify their product offering. I think, in terms of challenges, one is for sure fraud detection. Who hasn't ever had an accident with a car and then goes down to the body shop and is like, I just broke the front of my car, but hey, there is that little scratch, like, kind of raise your hand if you never did that, because I don't believe it. So that's one of the most known issues of the insurance industry. And then, of course, we have other bits, right? The underwriting in terms of pricing. Again, as you mentioned, the more information you have, the better underwriting you can do. But if you don't have that information, because there is an agency problem, you're lacking that performance indicator. And then, of course, the streamlining of processing. I think insurance right now is still at that stage where a lot of things are done manually, especially in certain regions where, digitalization is what gives you an edge. And as a general piece of information, less than 30% of the world, small, medium businesses, digitalized these days. So, we see 5G there, and us having like fancy presentations, but really like there is no, I've seen people coming up on stage earlier and still holding their piece of paper and, piece of research, I come up with this, right? But I'm one out of 6 people. So I think that's kind of explains the ratio if you look at it.
Yes, so now mentioning fraud, talking about some of that, your friend who had a frontal damage and he would like to fix and repair the rear of his car, and some other challenges for the underwriting and for the process. So Andrea, I can see that you sound negative by just mentioning some challenges. So we are talking about the AI and this is being scary. So what's the solution now do you suggest by implementing the AI?
Absolutely. Like, I don't want to scare anyone. I'm just giving you the real picture. But for sure, we have plenty of solutions out there. And there is technical and non-technical, really. Like, technical, of course, leveraging technology the best way we can. Maybe we can expand on it a little bit later. But also addressing actual business issues, right? Because it doesn't matter the technology. We have to remember we're running a business. So the basics are you want to make more money. You want to optimize your costs. And of course, there is plenty of solutions out there in terms of cybersecurity. I was teaching at a business school a couple of days ago, and we had a full lecture around it. And the good thing of AI, for example, is that it doesn't just mean more threats, but also it means more solutions. So I go back to my initial point, which is very much how, what you do about it. And again, I mentioned climate change because that's an opportunity again that can be leveraged by insurance these days, because everyone is scared about floods and kind of disasters, and they need to be covered for that.
So now you are talking about embracing technology. So now, what will be the impact of implementing AI on insurance companies, especially some insurance companies, they're gonna think of how beneficial this integration for me as an insurance company? There are efforts, cost, and blah, blah, blah. So how can this AI integration impact the fields?
Yeah, the impact for sure is great. As I mentioned, the more you need to think, most of you here are insurers and or work in the space. Think about your business. Think how much paper you use and how much human power you have to use to do most of the tasks. And that gives you already a measure of how much you can actually save by leveraging AI and automation. I think this chart that I'm displaying here is pretty interesting, because if you look just on the shoulder of Mohammed there, you can see that claims is the area where actually there is the most critical and the most impactful applications of AI. Why? Because most of that, of course, right now is done manually, and that's where the most improvement can be done. Other areas like product management, things like marketing, sales distributions, I think they are not, of course, the core business of the companies, of insurances. So, for sure there is improvement that can be done, but probably you are outsourcing that already to someone. So what you want to do is look at your core business and understand where you can, make the real change. It's the usual 80-20 rule, right? So change that 20% that is going to have the 80% impact. And that's how you should think when you apply this type of solution to your business. Some did already. And as you see, some numbers don't lie. Like there is, 75% moved into the chatbot space. There is 1.3 million expected in terms of savings. And if you spread this about the amount of companies, which again, if we look in terms of the real tier one players, is not many, you can realize that actually it's a lot of money for a few people that can be saved by leveraging these technologies. I think in terms of other application, as I mentioned, of course, there is fraud detection, which essentially AI, I'm probably going to see an example later, but AI can help you very much improving that step, which we know there is a massive human bias and bribes. And again, the example that I gave you before about you yourself going to your local body shop and try to get more money, more value out of your money. There is a streamlined process, which again, mentioned means, everything that is manual, try and automate, and we've seen this happening in the banking sector already, especially since 2008. And then, of course, precision. Like, at the end of the day, it's a statistics game, right? And you want to have the best numbers that help you making the best decisions, so you can charge the best premium without ending up making a loss. And by having all this data and being able to have a bigger brain now that is available to you, and not like 100 employees that have to crunch Excels the whole time, you're going to be able to get a quicker, better, more specialized result than you were before. So in terms of benefits, I think it's self-explanatory really in terms of what I explained, but there is expansion in efficiency. So efficiency is a core metric by which you have to measure these solutions. Of course, customer experience, as I mentioned, is another one, and then there is revenue growth, which comes with differentiation, but also in terms of amount of customers that you can serve with one solution, for example.
Okay, that's great. So I hope now everyone got a clear idea how beneficial integration of AI within insurance company, and then we come up with the InsurTech. So Andrea, as you know, I have co-founded Joclaims 3 years ago, and where do you think the landscape for such startups in our region or all over the world?
Great question. Like, again, as you know, I'm on the VC space, right, in the venture capital space, so I crunch startups every single day of my life, which I love. Now, if we look at the landscape, couple what I told you before, right, the InsurTech industry and the insurance industry is following in a lagged way what fintech went through 10 years ago. So now fintech is a bubble. It's like literally overcrowded, especially in Western Europe. I do actually follow a few fintech companies here in MENA, and I realized that there are solutions that are literally copy-pasting here, and that's great because they get fast entry to market, so there is a massive opportunity for companies and capture what work in other countries and apply to these countries. So, again, the InsurTech is following more or less the same wave. And if you look at the landscape, this is like source CB Insight, which I suggest every one of you to subscribe to. It's a very good source of reports and give you very interesting names. This is the situation in US, Europe, and APAC, right? Now, as you see, there is a lot of startups out there, and these are just literally the top 25, top 100. And you can think that there is so many other smaller players that are entering the market. This is what MENA region looks like as of, I think it was end of Q1, if I'm not wrong. And we see that basically claims management, this is for sure one of the areas addressed, reinsurance, infrastructure, data analytics. And then you need to think that this is just what falls under the InsurTech umbrella. Then there is more services that are actually can be plugged into the industry because they serve a part of the business that you're running. So actually there is a lot of offer out there. Now, getting a bit more practical, of course I brought up a little business case. Tractable comes from my dear UK, and Joclaims, of course, a local player. I made a comparison, and I think of course you can read the bullet points, but I think what really we take away from this example is one, the technology is there, and as this goes down exactly what I was telling you before. AI per se is available. Image recognition is something that exists, okay? You can source it pretty easily. But then the question is, okay, what are you going to do with A, the data that you have, and do you have enough data? And B, how are you going to implement and plug this into your workflow? And I think this is where the difference lies, because if we look at Tractable, they only address one part of the issue, which is image recognition. There is no streamlining. Even their database is kind of limited. And then what about the famous so what? So once I have this image, what am I going to do with it, right? Now where Joclaims comes in place in this case, I think it is pretty amazing. It is not only streamline the process, so it's something that you can implement in your whole workflow, which means help you saving more money, but also has the biggest database, if I'm not wrong, based on what I found in Jordan and expanding in the Middle East. Now, it is literally the same game that financial services providers were playing 30 years ago. It doesn't really matter the quality of your solution. I mean, I'm not gonna do names, but I don't know any one of you that works in banking or has experience with banking tools. There are some that are very, very famous, but when you use them, they look horrible, and they actually don't even do the work. But because they've been there forever, they have the best amount of data. And so being the first entrant in a market and collecting the most quality data, then is going to allow the machine to, when I say the machine, I mean AI and machine learning, to actually extract the best value. And so giving you the best solution to then implement in your business and save a lot of time, really, like, you know. But I think that's my perspective. You know your business better than me, so maybe there's something more that you can say about that.
Yes, actually, in Joclaims, I'm just going to speak it just in briefly. Some of the solutions that we have provided in Joclaims, mainly we have provided 4 solutions. The first one is to digitalize motor claim process and AI insurance pricing and underwriting, optimized customer experience, and finally we could provide reports and KPI so insurance companies they can improve their internal cycles. For the achievements and other stuff, I'm not going to mention it here, but we are proudly saying that we have the largest, as you mentioned before, interconnected network, and we are dealing with around 12 insurance companies, and most of the POs and repair orders, they are being sent through our system.
It is very much about building quality, yes, but in this case also quantity is very important. Yes. And having a first mover advantage, yes, and being able to gather all this network of providers, yes, parts, database, and everything.
And this is where, as you mentioned before, the machine learning and the AI, once you integrate these database together, so now we could predict the cost of the claim, the cost of spare parts within the technology, and we really thank our customers for believing and trusting our solutions.
Fair enough. No, yes. That sounds very promising.
Thank you. So now here, I think most of the attendees here and from the C-level, from the C-suite and the general managers. So here, how can they improve and they grow their profits just by leveraging AI within their insurance companies? If you can just answer that.
That's, I'm sure, the most reason why everyone is sitting at this table today, really, no? Because we don't do charity here. All we do is try and make business. And I appreciate that. So probably telling you how you can make more money or save more money is the most interesting part. Now, let me just call up this one. So this slide essentially is not mine, yeah? Just for reference, it's from McKinsey, which of course is the reference point, and explain the general strategy when you want to implement data, but also looking at insurtech and insurance incumbents in the space. I think the first suggestion is one, look, there is a lot of lack of talent, okay, tech talent. And if you think about the age of the oldest insurance companies, which are the ones ruling the market, is something that is reflected also on the workforce, as you probably all agree. Now, to leverage the new technologies, you also need fresh talent, and at least in Europe, some insurance companies that started doing that, and that's one way that they went down. So they started trying and hire the best brains. Now, the problem one is retention. So you need to not only find the best talent, but also keep it, which, trust me, is really a challenge. But then there is another strategy, which is partner with the insurtech. I mean, I just gave you a list of probably 100 potential companies they can work with. We have one sitting here. Try and find these capabilities where you can't get them in-house by hiring someone. So it's the usual buy versus build, okay? That applies to literally, again, every single industry that is transitioning into technology. And sometimes you can't build it, just buy it, because actually there is agile companies out there that are able to just maybe address one bit, okay? But give you that specific solution. If you're able to puzzle all the pieces together, you can actually create your customized all-in-one solution. Another thing is, don't just be reactive, be proactive. Solvency II, I think I was reading there is some regulation coming up in the MENA region as well. There is more regulations coming up for sure in the next years. So rather than be there, just wait for the regulation. Also, if you want to outpace your competitors, try and be there before them. And maybe, like they did for ESG, environmental social governance, and the Article 6 and 9, like some companies, they were just literally self-applying the regulation on them just because to look better than their competitors, and actually kind of worked. And they were already ready when the others were obliged to comply with both articles. So at the end of the day, first mover advantage is always a winning strategy. And then, as I mentioned, how do we make more money? Well, you need to differentiate, right? Now, the threats, because your business is a business that, in theory, is happy when there is more threats because people are more scared, and so they need to cover themselves. Then, well, cyber security and the environmental impact are definitely two areas that you want to get into, because cyber security insurance, parametric and weather insurance, and I'll add you one more actually. If you are familiar with crypto blockchain, like that's a space where I'm sure you all read the news about FTX and other happenings. Is a space that is very interesting, and actually this is a massive gap in the industry right now, because not only is not fully regulated, but people can't even be covered if they lose anything. There is an interesting case of a very good friend of mine, nonetheless, one of my founders. She managed to get an NFT has been stolen from her, and she managed to get it refunded by suing basically the wallet provider, which in theory, it was the first case, I think, in the world, someone that managed to do that. So if based on that you're able to build an insurance product, there you go, you're gonna probably be the first mover again and the only provider. I found something just funny because I wanna share. A third area could be pet insurance. Not my specialty really, but I think most of us during COVID, so okay, let me get a pet or something else because I feel lonely or something like that, or maybe I have more time. And in fact, a lot of people did, and now there is more pets there, and also actually there is more demand for this type of insurances. So yeah, this is probably my overall suggestion. I think we will share the content at the end, so you will find this one as well, and this probably gives you more of a breakdown of what I just described to you, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So here, to conclude, what do you think would be the killer applications of the AI insurance industry?
Yeah, so killer application is a couple of things, okay? For sure, it is important. I would say let's give 4 pre-suggestions, okay? One is, as we said, get familiar with AI and automation, like that's key. And of course, then more practical stuff, like have an actual plan that would be a long term, and get familiar with data. So as we said, data is the core of your business if you haven't realized yet, but I'm sure you do know. So what are you doing with it? This is the real question. So having a strong data strategy, it is very important. And then, I think the final one is kind of a composition of everything that we discussed, right? So there is something that, we didn't really mention during this presentation, IoT, Internet of Things, so biometrics, sensors. Yeah, I'm sure most of you have the Apple Watch, for example, right, and things like that. So leverage IoT to gather better data, and by leveraging IoT, gathering better data, and leveraging AI, which means having a bigger brain that can think smarter, right? You can then output better performance. And so by having all of these, you can have actionable insight and a technical advantage over your competition.
Since you are talking about leveraging AI and your business helps startups and companies to leverage AI. So, and I hear that you have a gift for the audience and the guests here.
Yeah,
so would you mind to share it with us?
Absolutely. So yeah, we do. That's part of what we do. We help companies build their data strategy and scouting startups that can help you, having this kind of technological advantage. Also, me and my co-founder, we wrote a little book. So if you guys want to have a read, you can scan the QR code, or there is a link, of course. Massive discount for everyone at the Aqaba conference. But that could be, it's not a massive piece of book, but it definitely gives you the gist of business models, basics, and is built for non-executives, so for non-technical people, but executives. So our target are people like you. They're director, CEO, that need to understand the technology, but probably you're gonna hire someone to do it. So I'm not gonna teach you how to code, but more like understanding half of the stuff that we discussed during this presentation. And I mean, in general, this is what we do. Impact Foundry is my business, and Tesseract Academy is one of the startups that I have my incubation portfolio. And they basically build a university that teaches executives how to deal with data. And
thank you, Andrea, and we really appreciate your experience and the information you have shared with us. Thank you again, and hopefully we can see more companies that leveraging AI and they can go with digital transformation into just improving what we have seen, the challenges, and we try hopefully to use the solutions that you have shared before.
Thank you very much
again. And you have any question, please, you can share it with us.
Thank you for being a great moderator.
Thank you. تفضل.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Nice presentation. I will have to say artificial intelligence in insurance markets has many issues. You actually discussed some of them when it comes to data privacy, security, biases, and fairnesses. This is the most important one for me. Artificial intelligence today discriminate on the ground of race, and for me it's more important like gender. Like women today in the insurance industry like have less right compared to men, have less leadership positions. This is a serious issue. Like, how do you know, given the fact that it's like a globalization today, that your institution or whatever going on in UK established certain type of regulation to make sure everything is going well? This is one thing. The other thing, also we have ethical consideration. Today actuaries misuse artificial intelligence when it comes to pricing and underwriting, also claim handling. So if there's any specific regulation or model laws are there in UK to address such issues? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. I'm smiling because I've been asked this question I think 4 times in the last 48 hours in 3 different places. So like, so you're asking 2 questions. One about, the first one was about how, remind me, sorry, the first part was about how we make sure.
Discrimination against women in the insurance industry via artificial intelligence. Are there any regulation in UK or in Europe?
But you asked something else before.
And yeah, this is the first one. Is like bias and fairness.
Okay.
Bias and bias. And the second one is ethical consideration. I tell you, in the US we have model laws. Like nothing is established yet, but we have model laws, and we require insurers who use artificial intelligence to disclose it with us, so we can track what the heck is going on in the market.
So I'll start from the regulation. From a data perspective, because as we mentioned, even before you get down to the AI space, right? There is the raw material, which is data. So how do we handle information and security? Now in Europe, as I'm sure most of you know, we have GDPR. That's a massive drive that applies to UK as well. So it's kind of covered. Here in the Middle East, and I know this because I was doing some research on that space a few months ago, I know certain countries of GCC fall under a common regulation, which is shared between, I think, Saudi, Bahrain, Jordan as well, and another country that has been unified last year. But most of the other countries, they own their own regulation. Now, this is one issue, you're right, because then how are you going to apply AI and how are you going to source the data in every single country? There is always going to be a different way, so it's risky. I don't have, of course, like, my answer would be a unified regulation, but I'm not the regulator, so I can't, give you more than that. In Europe, from an AI perspective, though, there is an AI regulation that is coming up. They are actually working very hard on that. There is even a website. There is euairegulation.eu, I think, something like that. And that essentially is a common work that they're doing to address exactly what you're saying. So, how do we actually use it? Which takes me to the ethics. Now, it's like what I said at the beginning. From a big power, there is big responsibility, like someone said a few years ago. And the ethical consideration is, first of all, who are you going to make this technology available to, and why? Now, the risk with that is you can't be restrictive, because everyone should have access to the best technology, but you also have to be mindful. And it's a bit like weapons, right? You can hold a gun for self-defense, but you can also harm people with that. So I think the regulatory piece should actually address how these technologies are leveraged to then create value rather than destroy it. And I think this is where, if you're able, as a company, to show that because you're implementing a certain technology, you are able to create value and to create opportunities, then you're worthy using it. But if you're actually destroying value, well, at that point, no, you shouldn't be using it. So I hope he answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question, actually. So regarding AI in motor claim, it's very clear that how AI would be used to streamline and automate the cycle of motor claims. But could you give an example of how it could protect against fraudulent claims? I mean, did we reach a level where we can detect through AI a fraudulent motor claim at this point in time?
So let me answer this question. So I think with the data we gathered before in our database, we can detect if this car, for example, has been damaged with the same area for multiple times. So we can detect this thing. Also, by implementing the image processing and the AI, we can know the way that this damage happened some way. So we can know if this is a manually accident or this is a normal accident. Also, by having multiple information from different companies using the VIN number, you can detect if this VIN number is recurring with different insurance companies. Then you can call to the insurance company and then you can investigate more. So I think, yes, that will help a lot.
Understood.
Sorry, but the main concern here is about the data, the quality of the data. How to obtain the data? Is it real time? The accessibility, is it relevance? Is it the appropriateness, the coherence?
Yes.
Could be integrated with other data in the system. So please, and do you have enough data, big data, to take the decision from the system directly?
Yes, yes. So the kind of data AI collects, we have two types of data. We have directed data, which is the data the system asks to fill. For example, we need make, model year, exact data. And these data, the system will start learning. And if you have, let's say, rubbish data and you have too much data, that's why we have data scientists who collect these data, analyze, and then they upload on the system. So there is a manual entry just to teach the system. That's where the machine learning comes, and then you have the direct inputs. For example, a pricing system. This is a direct information that uploaded on the system. But for the accidents, of course, you can detect, analyze, but having data scientists to analyze these data and to filter what the system needs, that you can make sure that you have, just like you have said, clean database.
There is no dominant alternative for the decision making.
Can you give me an example, for example?
You have several scenarios.
Okay.
And you don't have one optimal scenario. What to do?
You will talk with the statistics and the probabilities. For example, I can know that in such cases, if there is no decision making, we can work on percentages. If, for example, in the IT, there's something called if statement. You can check if percentages, for example, above 60%, then go with that decision. You cannot be sure 100% in such scenarios. That's why the system keeps learning, and every single new case, this is a new, let's say, input where the system they can rely on later. I hope that answers the question.
Hi. What is your recommendation while dealing with AI? One of the major factors is that the investment in AI is being accelerating in a massively, and many changes are being implemented. So when you take the decision that I want to use this technology, after 2 months it might be backdated, you know. So what is your best recommendation in here?
Okay, should I go? So AI, it's not only the way of, when we say we need to implement AI, doesn't mean that you need to rely fully on AI. AI, as we said, you collect the data, and this is how you build the scenarios your system should react with. So for any new technology, you implement this new technology to improve the cycle and the process. Doesn't make necessarily that you have to change the way you are using. So having new technologies and the new, let's say, changes that will also improve the cycle will not stop you from having this one, just like a software update for what you are doing. And of course, that will not need too much change and training. That might be slight changes for the sake of cycle improvements.
Can I add a little bit? Yeah, I'll add a little bit on that because I go what you mean. This is where, as you remember earlier, I was mentioning build or buy, okay? Now, you have to be realistic with yourself in your case, and I don't know if you manage a big company or a small company. But first, as you were mentioning now, like analyze what are you trying to solve for, because you're not gonna change completely a company from one day to another. Then build a plan, which means prioritize what has the most impact for you. And it goes down to the basic consultancy thing, right? It is very much, okay, right now we have good operations. Let's bring a case, okay? Let's look at a specific case. We have good operations, but terrible customer service. I'm losing customers because my customer service is terrible. Now, how big is your company? Let's say you have a medium-sized insurance business. Maybe hiring a whole team of developers, you can't because it's too much, but you could spend your money in the real investment actually in a human, and the human could be your chief data officer, which is a position that actually is quite overlooked sometimes. No one thinks about it, but a chief information officer, not necessarily the CTO, because the role of a CTO in the past was very much to be the technical person, but by the fact that you can literally find anything online, like, tech is cheap. All you need to do is to find someone that can help you driving these decisions, right? So let's say you get a CDO or a CIO, and then together you have to say, okay, what type of solution do we need to solve this issue? And even there, you realize that most of these solutions are available out there in the market. And for small, medium companies, my suggestion is always buy, don't build. Why? Because your question is essentially, how do I beat obsolescence as the technology changes? And the answer is the same as, how do I beat cyber threats as cyber security changes? It's simple. Go to a big player, because whilst your core business is to do insurance, their core business is to do tech. And so they have like the best developers, and it's no brainer for you. You have a fixed fee per month, really.
And Andrea, just let me to add something, that when we talk about AI, we don't talk about a fully intelligent system. We are talking about a system that learns from the experience and from the data we are collecting, and there is some scenarios and some single parts where you need to implement the AI. So it doesn't mean that your company will rely completely on AI, just like ChatGPT, for example. No, some certain parts will rely on AI. For example, damage detection, for example, accident way. So some kinds of the cycle will be managed by the AI, not full cycle. Any other questions?
Also, sorry, I'll add another piece, because that was a very good question. Remember one thing, exactly, because what you just said clicked with me. What you don't want, and again, this is my personal view, you never want a one-stop shop always, because sometimes you need to differentiate the risk, right, and business continuity. So the fact that you can address only certain part of your business is actually a good thing, because in that case you give yourself space to look at other solutions as you go. So that's general advice, I think.
Yes.
معلش يعني مساء الخير مهندس محمد، راح احكي باللغه العربيه بس شوي حتى تكون الصوره اوضح. يعني بدي احاول بس شوي اوضح الفكره اللي كانت بالسيشن الاول وما كانت واضحه لانه بجوز الوقت كان ضيق. موضوع العدد القضايا الهائل جدا اللي عم بتعاني منه شركات التامين بالمحاكم، واللي الجزء الاساسي منه بعيد عن وسائل الحل البديله والوساطات، هي الجزء الاساسي اختلاف التعويض وتقدير التعويض، واللي بأساسه قضائيا اللي عم بيقوم فيه الدور اللي هو ما يسمى بالخبير أو إلى آخره من التسميات. الآن للأسف يعني في على بحسب الواقع الآن المنظور الخبراء عم بتجاوزوا أو جزء أساسي منهم عم بتجاوزوا كثيرا في عملية تقدير حجم الضرر وتسعيره حتى يصل بالنهاية إلى مبلغ التعويض اللي القاضي بينستند له بقرار الحكم بالمحصلة. الآن السؤال ببساطة إنه الذكاء الاصطناعي وهي التكنولوجيا الاي اي وين ممكن نوظفها بحيث ممكن تسعفنا حتى تكون تقارير الخبراء أكثر شفافية، سواء بمرحلة تحديد الضرر أو تسعير هذا الضرر، حتى ما يضل هو فقط يعني نسميه ماسك الأختام ولا ينطق إلا عن يعني الأشياء المحسومة الغير قابلة للنقاش. طبعا ما معرفتي أنا بوسائل التقاضي والاعتراض على تقرير الخبرة، ولكن أنا بحكي من الواقع اليومي، واللي إذا بدنا نحكي عن مؤشر عن مشكلة حقيقية هي المشكلة في المبالغة في تقارير الخبرة. يعني الآن في عندك متضرر عم تسأله ليش عم بتروح على القضاء، في جهة عم تمنحه تعويضات من
هائلة
بناء على تقارير خبرة احنا كقطاع تأمين عم نعاني منه وعم نحط علامات استفهام على جزء كبير من هاي التقارير. فالآن يعني حتى نكون قد يكون هاي الآن التكنولوجيا قادرة على ضبط هذه التقارير. أنا ما بقول إنها تضبطها بمعنى يعني إنه ما تكون يعني تعطي التعويض الحقيقي، ولكن إذا في عوامل معينة وعوامل سلبية قد تكون تساهم في شفافية تقارير الخبرة والتسعير بالشكل الدقيق وتحديد أحجام الضرر بالشكل الدقيق، بحيث تتقدم المعلومة للقاضي بالشكل الصحيح حتى يصل إلى قراره العادل لجميع الأطراف دون إجحاف. شكرا.
نعم شكرا على سؤالك. بس he's talking about how to integrate between the AI and the issues that most of the claimants when they get accident they go to the suit and they sue the insurance company. How they can AI help them by something? I have the answer. Okay. So بشكرك على سؤالك. زي ما تفضل معالي لما حكى اليوم عن توظيف هاي اليوم الخبرات والبرامج. اليوم احنا بالاردن وشفنا كيسز، يعني احنا اليوم عندنا اكثر من 70,000 كليم تم معالجتها اليوم ثرو جوكليمز، وشفنا عدد كبير من الحالات اليوم اللي تم إصدار تقارير خبرة لا تستند على واقع فعلي وتم فيها مبالغة واضحة في أسعار القطع في حجم الضرر. اليوم المشكلة الأساسية هي في وجود تشريع يسمح اليوم بالاعتماد على التكنولوجيا اليوم وعلى الأنظمة الموجودة اليوم للتسعير. هذا القرار اليوم أكيد راح يحمي شركات التأمين اليوم، وأكيد ما راح يكون في مصلحة الأشخاص المنتفعين اللي أنت حكيتهم اليوم أو الجهة اللي بتحارب هذا النوع اليوم من العدالة والشفافية الموجودة. طبعا أكيد إحنا عم نحاول، وأكيد مع الاتحاد اليوم ومع الشركات نحاول ناخذ تشريع، ولكن توظيف سيستمز اليوم الذكاء الاصطناعي او المشين ليرنينج او حتى اتمته المعلومات اكيد راح تساهم بمنع الفرودز وتوفير اليوم عدد هائل. يعني احنا بدون فرودز فقط على عمليه التسعير يعني قدرنا نوفر up to 35% على شركات التامين، فما بالك بالكيسز اللي اصلا فرودد كيسز ومتعمده تم تغيير فيها بعض القطع. احنا عارفين عن هذا الموضوع، وان شاء الله بهمه الاتحاد وبهمه اليوم الشركات اليوم ان شاء الله راح يكون في لنا بصمه وقدره على مساعده بالتشريع حتى على اعتماد هيك انظمه. حدا عنده سؤال ثاني؟ I think we are done. Thank you all for coming here and joining our session. Thank you.
شكرا للسيد محمد أبو حمدة ومستر أندريا ماريا، وأدعو دكتور مؤيد كلوب لتكريم رئيس اللجنة والمتحدث أيضا. شكرا لكم، شكرا دكتور مؤيد، وشكرا للسيد محمد ومستر أندريا. خلونا بس قبل لو سمحتوا بعد إذنكم، يمكن هي مش موجودة بأجندة اليوم، لكن في كلمة للسيد محمد الناصر رئيس قسم التسويق وتطوير المنتجات من زين كاش للحديث عن دور زين كاش في قطاع التأمين، فليتفضل. أوكي يا من هون يا أوكي أهلا وسهلا، تفضل. You're welcome.
مساء الخير جميعا. في البداية بحب أشكركم على هذا التنظيم الرائع صراحة. بالنسبة لليوم بس بدي أعطي نبذة قصيرة عن دورنا إحنا كزين كاش كوننا راعي لذهبي لهذا المؤتمر. طبعا اليوم احنا كيف وبدي اتطرق لدور الشركه اليوم كيف في دعم قطاع التامين في الاردن. طبعا في البدايه اسمحوا لي اني اشكر بالنيابه عن اخواني الاعضاء الاداره التنفيذيه لشركه زين كاش لمنظمين هذا المؤتمر. وبالمناسبه هاي بس بدي اشارككم او اسلط الضوء بالنسبه لموضوع التركيز على دور الشركات اللي هي التكنولوجيا المالية مثل شركة زين كاش، وكيف تعكس هذه الشركات رؤية السادة بنك المركزي الأردني في مجال اللي هو الشمول المالي في الأردن. فلو تطرقنا اليوم ونظرنا الرؤية الاستراتيجية للبنك المركزي وعرضهم للبرنامج الوطني للشمول المالي لعام 2023 و2027، بنلاحظ انه في تركيز اليوم، وحسب كمان ما الاخوان قبل قليل الشيء اللي تطرقوا له في موضوع اللي هو التحول الرقمي. بنلاحظ انه التحول الرقمي اليوم اصبح شيء اساسي في معظم القطاعات، سواء كان في قطاع التأمين، في قطاع التعليم، قطاع الاتصالات، أو حتى اللي هو القطاع المالي. فاليوم إحنا بالنسبة لنا كزين كاش كبداية، إحنا اليوم زين كاش هي كشركة اليوم واحدة من الشركات التابعة لشركة أو لمجموعة زين في الكويت. طبعا من فترة من عدة سنوات شركة زين الجروب المجموعة ركزت على مفهوم إيجاد ذراع آخر بالإضافة لذراع الاتصالات اللي هو ذراع التكنولوجيا المالية. طبعا هون هذا التركيز أجى من عدة سنوات. ليش؟ لأنه في أهمية في أيامنا هاي في موضوع اللي هو التركيز على الفنتك أو التكنولوجيا المالية. وبالتالي تم تأسيس شركة زين كاش في الأردن، لأنه اليوم طلعت مجموعة زين أنه السوق الأردني اليوم هو من أحد الأسواق اللي واصلة لمرحلة الماتشوريتي في مجال التكنولوجيا المالية ومجال الشمول المالي بشكل عام. طبعا هذا احنا واضح بالنسبة لنا كلياتنا من خلال دعوات اللي هو الأخوان في البنك المركزي أو حتى اللي هو وزارة الاقتصاد الرقمي وغيرها، في أنه اليوم تدعم دائما الشركات والبنوك في عملية التحول الرقمي في مجال اللي هو التكنولوجيا المالية، وبالتالي تحقيق أكبر كم ممكن من ناحية اللي هو الوصول إلى مرحلة متقدمة في مجال الشمول المالي في الأردن. طبعا من هون شركة زين كاش دخلت واتبعت استراتيجية محددة في هذا المجال. تبنت الرؤية كأحد الشركات اللي تبنت الرؤية تاعت البنك المركزي، وبالتالي قدمت حلول رقمية في مجال الدفع الإلكتروني. وهذه الحلول الرقمية تمت من خلال طرح تطبيق على الهاتف المحمول. هذا الهدف منه هو الوصول انه التسهيل على العملاء اليوم من قطاعات مختلفة، سواء العملاء اللي هو في قطاع البنوك أو حتى في القطاعات الأخرى مثل قطاع التأمين وغيرهم، التعليم وغيرهم من القطاعات الثانية. فأصبح اليوم في تسهيل على الشركات أو على الأفراد في عملية اللي هو فتح المحافظ الإلكترونية. وبالتالي احنا اليوم صار في عندنا تركيز مش فقط على العملاء اللي ما عندهم إمكانية على فتح الحسابات المصرفية أو في البنوك، أصبح الأمر متاح لكافة الشرائح اليوم في المجتمع لتقديم خدمات دفع إلكتروني ومحافظ إلكترونية على أساس أنها تغطي كافة شرائح المجتمع اليوم في الأردن. ومن هذا المنطلق شركة زين كاش اليوم قدمت طبعا خدماتها من خلال التطبيق الهاتف المحمول، واليوم من خلال الأرقام، إذا بدي أستعرض معكم بعض الأرقام عن تجربتنا اليوم إحنا في مجال التحول الرقمي وتقديم التكنولوجيا المالية في سوق الأردن، فوصلت مثلا اليوم زين كاش حاليا واصلين إحنا تعدينا 500 ألف مشترك معنا في المحافظ الإلكترونية. بالإضافة إلى أنه الشركة اليوم أصبح أو الأرقام من ناحية أرقام التشغيل اليوم إحنا بنشغل تقريبا بحدود 13 مليون عملية دفع إلكتروني في الأردن، وهاي العمليات الدفع تقدر قيمتها تقريبا بحدود 1.5 مليار دينار أردني خلال العام السابق. وبالتالي هذا بيأكد أن اليوم في حاجة كان فعلا لعملية التحول الرقمي وعملية اللي هو تقديم التكنولوجيا المالية في السوق الأردني مثل غيرها من الأسواق الأخرى في العالم أو حتى في المنطقة. طبعا من هذا المنطلق طبعا احنا اليوم كزين كاش قمنا في اتباع استراتيجية واضحة، وكانت هاي الاستراتيجية مبنية على أساس أنه احنا نبدأ نبني علاقات استراتيجية مع شركات من مختلف القطاعات. فمثلا قدمنا كان عندنا علاقات استراتيجية مثلا مع قطاع البنوك، كان عندنا علاقات استراتيجية مع قطاع اللي هو الاتصالات، قطاع التعليم، حتى اللي هو قطاع التأمين. فإحنا مثلا اليوم من خلال، إذا بدي أسلط الضوء أكثر على موضوع اللي هو قطاع التأمين، كوننا إحنا بمؤتمر مختص في مجال التأمين أو في هذا القطاع الحيوي في الأردن، اليوم إذا بدي أسلط الضوء برضو على أو أركز وأدخل بالعمق في الحديث اللي تفضلوا فيه إخواني هلأ قبل قليل في مجال اللي هو الانشورتك ومجال اللي هو الانفنتك، وكيف فينا نقدم حلول عملية اليوم تخدم هذا القطاع في سوق الأردن. بنلاحظ مثلا أنه اليوم في عنا يعني 3 محاور، وأكون معكم صريح، إحنا اليوم يعني خلال المؤتمر وحديثنا سواء كان في الأمس أو اليوم مع عدة شركات، يعني كان في أحاديث ودية هيك بيننا وبين الشركات في هذا القطاع، على أساس أنه ندرك أو إحنا اليوم نلتمس ونعرف وين فينا مجال أو وين في مجال أن نقدم تعاون في مجال اللي هو الربط مع التكنولوجيا المالية في قطاع التأمين. فلاحظنا أنه في عندنا مشكلة عامة، وهاي المشكلة اللي هي في مجال اللي هو الكليم مانجمنت. فاليوم يعني لاحظنا في عدة شركات اليوم تأمين أنه في عندهم مشكلة في عملية اللي هو التحصيل أو دفع الكليمز سواء للأطباء أو غيرهم. فاليوم إحنا زين كاش عملنا علاقات مع عدة شركات، وخلال هذا المؤتمر طبعا إحنا وقعنا عدة اتفاقيات مع شركات تأمين من خلال هذا المؤتمر، على أساس أن إحنا نقدمهم حلول رقمية في مجال الدفع الإلكتروني. فمن ضمن هاي الحلول اللي هي مساعدة هاي الشركات على أساس أن نربط مع تطبيق زين كاش اليوم المتوفر عند شريحة كبيرة من العملاء، بحيث أنه يسهل على شركة التأمين اليوم بكل سهولة أنها تدفع هاي المطالبات أو هاي الكليمز للأطباء أو لهدول الأشخاص بطريقة فورية وآنية، بعيدا عن اللي هو الكاش أو الشيكات أو غيرها. وبالتالي اليوم احنا وجدنا أنه فعلا في مبالغ مالية كبيرة جدا بتم دفعها اليوم من خلال هاي المطالبات للأطباء وغيرهم، من خلال اللي هو الشيكات أو من خلال النقد. بس بدي أتطرق لنقطة بالنسبة اللي هو اليوم البنك المركزي برضه ووزارة الاقتصاد الرقمي تطرقوا إلى موضوع، وهذا الشيء طرحوه في السوق الأردني اليوم، اللي هو موضوع اللي هو الإلكترونيك KYC. الإلكترونيك KYC طبعا كان في تعليمات واضحة وتشريعات واضحة وتم تطبيقها عند البنوك وحتى المحافظ الإلكترونية، وهذا سهل كثير على الشركات وعلى العملاء حتى في عملية فتح المحفظة الإلكترونية، بحيث أنه ما يتم يكون في بيبر وورك ليوقع عليه العميل وهذا، وبالتالي العميل أصبح اليوم بكل سهولة وهو قاعد ببيته أو مكتبه أو غيرها أنه يفتح المحفظة الإلكترونية خلال لحظات، خلال أقل من 30 ثانية أو دقيقة بيقدر العميل اليوم أنه يفتح المحفظة ويبلش يشتغل ويستقبل فيها فلوس ويستخدم هاي الفلوس في عدة مجالات. وبالتالي هذا سهل علينا اليوم أنه إحنا نقدم هاي الخدمات، ويصبح اللي هو موضوع تقديم الخدمات الدفع الإلكتروني وربطها مع القطاعات بما فيها قطاع التأمين أصبح اليوم يسهل علينا، وبالتالي نحول هذا الكم من الدفع النقدي والشيكات لتحويلها بالتعاون معكم إلى دفع إلكتروني من خلال المحافظ الإلكترونية. النقطة الثانية والمهمة اللي هي برضه اتفقنا أو صار في عنا اليوم اتفاقيات مع بعض الشركات التأمين لعرض منتجات هاي الشركات من خلال تطبيقنا، وبالتالي نعرض هاي الخدمات على شريحة تتكون تقريبا من 500,000 عميل. هاي الشريحة اليوم أصبح عندهم قدرة انه يدخلوا من خلال التطبيق ويطلعوا على منتجات شركات التأمين المختلفة، وبالتالي اصبح العميل بيقدر انه اليوم برضه انه يدخل ويشتري منتجات شركات التأمين والبوالص مثل بوليصة التأمين الصحي او اللي هو تأمين السيارة وغيرها وغيرها من خلال التطبيق، وبيتم الخصم واصدار البوليصة التأمين بشكل مباشر من خلال التطبيق، وبالتالي هذا بيسهل عملية التحصيل النقدي وعملية إصدار البوالص بطريقة سهلة وآمنة وسريعة بنفس الوقت، لأنها طريقة آنية ولحظية. وآخر شيء بدي أتطرق له اسمحوا لي اللي هو أنه إحنا اليوم برضو في شركة زين كاش بنقدم بوابة دفع إلكتروني بتسهل برضو على العديد من الشركات اليوم انهم يربطوا هاي البوابه من خلال التطبيقات الخاصه في شركات التامين والمواقع الالكترونيه الخاصه في شركات التامين، وبالتالي اصبح اليوم لدى هاي الشركات فرصه انهم يزيدوا عمليات التحصيل من خلال اللي هو الدفع عن طريق البطاقات ومن خلال اللي هو البوابه الالكترونيه الخاصه بزين كاش، وبالتالي هذا الامر راح يسهل على هاي الشركات عمليه التحصيل الاني والفوري لخدمة هاي الشركات في القضاء على موضوع اللي هو التعامل النقدي وتحصيل المبالغ بشكل فوري. طبعا في الختام اسمحوا لي أني أشكركم مرة ثانية على حسن الاستماع، وإحنا اليوم من خلال هذا المؤتمر في عنا بوث، إذا في حدا عنده أي استفسار أو عنده أي معلومة إضافية بحب أنه التيم تبع زين كاش اوريدي موجود في البوث تاعنا، بنرحب فيكم في البوث تاعنا تاخذوا نظرة أوسع وأعمق عن الخدمات والمنتجات اللي احنا بنقدمها، وبرضو احنا جاهزين كلياتنا للاستفسار عن أي استفسار لكم أو إجابة على أي سؤال بتحبوا أنه نتناقش فيه بشكل مفصل. وشكرا لكم جميعا ويعطيكم ألف عافية.
شكرا للسيد محمد الناصر رئيس قسم التسويق وتطوير المنتجات من زين كاش. لو سمحت مستر محمد، يرغب الدكتور مؤيد كلوب مدير الاتحاد الأردني للتأمين لتكريمكم. تفضل دكتور. شكرا للحضور الكرام. والآن أرجو التوجه للغدا اللي هو اليوم بدعوة من الشريك البلاتيني لهذا المؤتمر ناسكوري، صحتين مقدما، ونلقاكم مساء في سرايا بالبيتش كلوب للحفلة الثانية من مؤتمر العقبة للتأمين.